By summer's end, the relentless American air attacks, combined with Patton's massive armored assault, brings the Third Army within striking distance of the German border.
My tanks advanced from the middle of August to the first day of September when we crossed the Meuse River. My tanks had advanced 328 miles in 12 days. So we were euphoric.
But that euphoria is short-lived. On September 1st, the 4th Armored Division is suddenly stopped in its tracks.
On the 2nd of September, no orders. So we sat 2nd, sat the 3rd, we didn't know what happened. But on the 3rd day, we learned that the reason we were stopped was gasoline.
The speed of the American advance has come at a cost. After 5 weeks of fighting, the Third Army has outrun its own supply lines and is forced to halt just west of the Moselle River. All they can do now is sit and wait for fuel.
And we knew that each day that we didn't move, that was giving time to the enemy. That's the most valuable commodity on the battlefield, time. And the Germans were masters at reorganizing. So we thought we had a window of about 5 days. If we sat for 5 days, we were going to start hitting resistance because they could gather their forces.
The Germans take full advantage of the lull and gear up for a massive counterattack that will turn into one of the biggest tank-on-tank battles of the Second World War. The Lorraine, a quaint and rustic region of eastern France near the German border. Armies have fought here for centuries, but nothing comes close to the ferocity of the fighting that took place here in the late summer of 1944. When this became a killing ground in one of the largest tank-on-tank battles of the Second World War. September 1st. General George Patton's American Third Army has pushed the Germans nearly 1,000 kilometers across France and now approaches the Moselle River, the last natural barrier before Germany. But just as they get within striking distance of the fatherland, a fuel shortage stalls the American advance. And the 4th Armored Division, Patton's lethal spearhead, is forced to sit idle.
And we knew that each day that we didn't move, that was giving time to the enemy. That's the most valuable commodity on the battlefield, time.
The German army is in desperate shape. Since the Allied invasion in June, Germany has lost 400,000 men and now has just 200 serviceable panzers. Soldiers in the field struggle to keep up morale.
Soldier never knows what's going on, except what's going on immediately around him. We still had faith. We still knew that we were going to win the war. We were told, you know, there's just something coming down the pipe that'll frighten them so bad that they'll swim back to New York.
Hitler has been gambling on the development of new wonder weapons to turn the tide of war in Europe. But their development has been slow, unsuccessful, and unable to match the speed of the Americans' advance. Hitler has one last chance at stopping the American juggernaut. Throughout 1944, German factories had been producing tanks in record numbers for the Eastern Front. Hoping to buy more time, Hitler diverts these freshly minted tanks to the west and creates new formations called Panzer Brigades. They're equipped with 135 Panzer IVs, 280 Panthers, and are supported by more than 14,000 infantry called Panzer Grenadiers. Among them is 18-year-old Heinz Altmann.
The idea was to have fast-moving small units available as kind of fire brigades. They were intended to be used in the east. They were used in the west because that was all available at the time to stop the Allied advance to the Rhine.
Hitler's plan is to encircle and destroy Patton's stalled Third Army, and then quickly advance northwest to drive a wedge into the Allied front line. In advance of the main attack, the 112th Panzer Brigade is ordered to head off the Americans, just west of the Moselle River, near the French village of Dompierre.
The assignment was to attack Patton's Third Army in the flank from the south. We rode on tanks as Panzer Grenadiers. We rode on a tank. Path was a real big thing. Made you feel pretty secure riding on one. We advanced until evening came and stopped for the night. We dug in the hills on either side of the valley, and the tanks stayed on the bottom in orchards. And what happened was, in the morning, the French notified the coming Allies. Here were these almost 50 tanks. The French 2nd Armored called in an airstrike. We didn't have any anti-aircraft protection in the brigade. These aircraft came and attacked the tanks. It was a terrible sight that we saw from our foxholes. The thing that stays in my mind was a tank being engulfed in napalm. And the crew comes out, they drop to the ground and roll around. Terrible sight, seeing a human being burned to death. And by late afternoon, we had lost most of our tanks. So by the next morning, we had something like 8 tanks left out of the almost 50 and retreated with the tanks. The Panzer Brigades didn't have their own artillery. They did not have their own reconnaissance units. The danger is you don't know where the enemy is. And the enemy knows where you are. It's like fighting with your eyes covered.
The main attack has not even begun, and the 112th Panzer Brigade has already lost nearly 80% of its armor. It's a blow to German plans, and worse is to come. By September 13th, the now refueled 4th Armored Division crosses the Moselle River and resumes its advance towards Germany. In response, Hitler changes his plan of attack and rushes to meet the advancing Americans.
He wanted us pushed back over the Moselle. He wanted to set up the Moselle as his winter defensive line. So he threw everything that he could gather at us at that particular time.
September 19th, 1944. Heavy fog rolls in across the Lorraine, grounding American warplanes. At dawn, the Germans attack. The advancing tanks encounter small pockets of American resistance. The sound of gunfire alerts a platoon of American M18 tank destroyers. They move forward, expecting to encounter a small force. only to find themselves face to face with more than 40 German tanks, including dozens of deadly new Panthers.